She did not just cheat on me, she cheated on me with the one man I hated. Hey everyone, settle in for a while because today's lineup has betrayal, control, longing, workplace chaos, family burnout, and one late night discovery that changes a daughter's understanding of her own past. Whether you are driving, cleaning, trying to fall asleep, or just hiding from the world for a few minutes, you are in the right place. First, a man sits down for a drink with his ex-wife and hears a confession that poisons half his memories in one sitting. Then, a woman realizes a 5-month relationship is already starting to feel like a power struggle. Story 3 is about a man who never questioned his sexuality until one silent ride home made his whole chest light up with fear. Story 4 turns a so-called friendly coworker into a workplace nightmare. Story 5 is for every exhausted parent who has ever looked around the kitchen and thought, absolutely not anymore. And Story 6 begins at 2:30 in the morning with a blocked social media account and a secret identity that collides with years of abuse. Story 1. She confessed to sleeping with the one man I hated. There are some truths that arrive years too late and still manage to ruin your whole night. I thought I was just stopping by my ex-wife's place to pick up our son for football practice, something ordinary we had done before because we had managed to stay on decent enough terms for the sake of our child. When I got there, she told me she had forgotten to mention that our son had to go to a birthday party instead. Then she said she was bored and asked if I wanted to stay and have a couple of drinks. I almost left anyway, but it was the weekend, I was already there. And I guess part of me still knew how to be comfortable around her in that old familiar way. So we drank, we got a little loose, the kind of loose where people stop measuring their words before they say them. At some point I asked what I thought was a stupid, throwaway question. I joked and asked if she had ever wanted to sleep with someone else back when we were married and going through our rough patch. She went quiet, and once she went quiet, I knew I had just stepped on something real. I asked again. She admitted that yes, back then, she had wanted other people. My heart was already starting to pound, but I kept going because now I needed to know whether this was just a fantasy she had carried around or something worse. I told her it did not matter anymore because we had been divorced for 7 years. I tried to sound casual. I tried to act like I was only curious. Then she told me she had actually done it. Not once, a few times, and not with some faceless stranger I had never met. Not with a random mistake from a distant season of our marriage. She slept with the one man from our old friend group that I had always hated, the one who used to put me down and call me a joker like it was all some big harmless laugh. Suddenly every insult he ever made landed differently. Suddenly every little joke felt like it had been sharpened behind my back while they were keeping a secret I never imagined. The more she talked, the worse it got. She said it started around 3 years into our marriage. Back then, we had moved overseas together, both of us trying to build a life far from home. We were South Asian, living in a new country, trying to make friends, and for a while we ended up close with 2 men and 1 woman from those expat meetups. The woman moved away. The 2 men stayed in the picture. One of them became the man I eventually could not stand. Later, we had our son, got consumed by parenting, drifted from each other, and eventually divorced 8 years into the marriage. That was the version of the story I thought I knew. Hard years, growing apart, life getting in the way, not betrayal hiding inside the middle of it. She told me they had been together at his place, at our place. Then she dropped the part that made me feel physically cold. One time the 3 of us were all at a mutual friend's house, and while I was talking to other people, they slipped away behind a closed door and came back out to the party like nothing had happened. I cannot explain what that does to your head. It is one thing to imagine cheating in some vague, abstract sense. It is another to realize there were rooms you stood in, conversations you had, nights you smiled through, while the truth was happening inches away from the life you thought you were living. I sat there in that strange after-midnight haze, listening to the woman I once loved casually rewrite my memories. By the end of the evening, I barely felt present in my own body. I was angry, obviously, but it was more than anger. It was humiliation. It was disgust. It was that sick realization that the man who mocked me probably enjoyed every second of it because he knew something I did not. And the worst part is that I cannot just slam the door and never deal with her again. We have a son. There will still be schedules and drop-offs and practical conversations. There will still be reasons to keep contact civil. But civil is not the same thing as unbroken. For years, I thought the marriage failed because life got heavy and we stopped showing up for each other. Now I know that somewhere inside that history was a long, ugly lie wearing the clothes of ordinary life. End story. Here is what I think. For him, this did happen yesterday because this is the day the truth finally reached him. Divorce does not erase betrayal if you only discover it years later. Co-parenting may still need to stay respectful, but pretending there is some warm friendship left here would be asking too much. Cheating is brutal enough. Cheating with the one person who openly belittled you is a level of cruelty that deserves real distance. Would you keep contact strictly about the child or try to hear every last detail before moving on? Let me know below. Story 2. 5 months in and he wanted to see my bank account. I am 25 years old, and apparently 5 months into dating someone is now long enough for them to ask for access to your private finances. That sentence still sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, which is probably why I got so irritated so fast. My boyfriend is 23. We have not been together for years. We do not live together. We do not share bills. We do not have children. We are still in that stage where you are supposed to be learning each other's habits, figuring out each other's rhythms, and deciding whether this feels safe enough to grow. Instead, I found myself defending my own bank account like I was being cross-examined. He told me it was childish and weird that I would not show him what was in it. The more he said that, the more suspicious I became, because if something is truly normal, you usually do not have to push that hard to make somebody feel guilty about it. You just say what you need and let them answer. But he kept pressing. I kept thinking, why do you need to know this so badly? Part of my discomfort is practical. It is simply none of his business, and another part matters just as much. I am a black woman. He is white. I was raised with the idea that you do not casually hand over your financial business, especially when that information can later be used to judge you, embarrass you, or quietly shift the balance of power in a relationship. So when he kept insisting, I did not hear trust. I heard control. He says he shows me his account as if that automatically means I should do the same, but I never asked him to do that. He is the one who brings it up. He is the one who volunteers numbers and balances and tries to make transparency look romantic when really it just feels premature. It almost feels strategic, like if he acts open enough, then my boundaries start to look unreasonable by comparison. And that is exactly what bothered me most, because if I showed him my account and it turned out I had less than him, I already know how that would sit in my chest. It would feel like he had information he could weaponize later, even subtly. Maybe not with one dramatic speech, maybe with little comments, little shifts, little ways of making me feel smaller every time money came up. This whole argument made me realize how quickly a relationship can stop feeling light. 5 months should still feel like curiosity and possibility, not like somebody trying to force their way into every locked drawer in your life. Instead, I found myself angry enough to think, you are not my husband, you are barely even established enough to be making this weird demand, and I do not owe you some financial performance just because you decided to overshare first. I also hate how these situations try to pull self-doubt out of you. You start asking yourself if maybe you are being dramatic, maybe you are too private, maybe you are overreacting. But every time I replayed the conversation, my gut said the same thing. This is not about closeness. This is about access. And access is one of those things that matters most when somebody starts acting entitled to it before they have earned it. End story. Here is what I think. This is a boundary test, plain and simple. The issue is not whether couples can ever talk about money. Of course they can. The issue is timing, pressure, and motive. A 5-month boyfriend should not be acting insulted that he cannot inspect her finances, especially when they do not even share a household. What really stands out to me is how quickly he tried to redefine privacy as immaturity. That is the kind of move people make when they want you to question yourself before you question them. Would you shut that conversation down for good, or stay and see whether he backs off after one firm no? Let me know below. Story 3. I never questioned my sexuality until one ride home. I had never looked at a man that way before, which is probably why it took me so long to understand what was happening. I am 29. I work in a commercial kitchen as a junior chef, and if you have ever worked in a place like that, then you already know the mood. Everything is hot, loud, rushed, and one mistake away from somebody snapping. That is where I met John. He is 32, divorced, and one of those people who somehow feels both rough around the edges and easy to trust. We fought a few times at work because everybody fights in that environment. Then service would end, the pressure would drain out of the room, and the whole team would have drinks before going home like nothing happened. I do not have a car, so every now and then, John would offer me a ride. He goes the same direction anyway, just a little farther than my stop. At first it was just practical, a favor, a decent co-worker helping me out. Then those rides started becoming the quiet part of my day that I looked forward to. That was the first clue. We talked about everything, kitchen drama, family stuff, the weird exhaustion that comes with long shifts and standing on your feet all day. He told me about his divorce from last August and how hard it had hit him. He still gets to see his child, and I could tell that was the one thing keeping him from completely falling apart back then. The more we talked, the closer we got. Our teammates started calling us best buddies. We would joke around at work, bump shoulders, mess with each other, do that whole half-ironic macho teasing thing people hide behind when they do not want to admit they like somebody's attention too much. Then something shifted. I started noticing that I liked being near him more than I could explain. I liked the way he smiled at me. I liked the way his touch lingered during our stupid joking around. I liked how long he held eye contact after a joke landed. There were moments where we would laugh, stop laughing, and then just look at each other for 1 second too long, like the whole room had stepped back and left us there alone. That should have terrified me immediately, but it did not. It interested me first, then it scared me, because I had only ever been with women. I had only ever understood myself one way. I was not walking around wondering if I had buried some secret my whole life. I was just living my life, doing my job, and then this one person walked in, and suddenly my body was reacting before my identity could catch up. 2 nights ago, he drove me home after another bad service. We were talking about how rough the shift had been, same as always. But when we got to my street, he did not just let me out and pull away. The engine stayed running. He looked at me, not casually, not absent-mindedly, just long enough to make everything inside me go tight. I reached for the handle, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. We made eye contact. Both of us laughed, that awkward fake laugh people do when they can feel something real pressing against the silence. And then I got out of the car with a quick goodbye, like I was trying to outrun my own pulse. I went home and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying it over and over. Was that just tension I invented because I wanted there to be something there? Was he feeling it too? Was I about to ruin a friendship, a work dynamic, maybe even my own understanding of myself, over one stretched-out moment in a parked car? But the truth is, this did not start in the car. The car was just the first moment I could not explain away. I think I liked him long before I let myself say that sentence in my own head. And once you know that, there is no going back to pretending it is only banter. End story. Here is what I think. I do not think he needs to solve his whole identity overnight just because one person cracked open a door he never expected to see. Attraction is messy sometimes. What matters more is that the feeling sounds real, mutual, and emotionally alive. The bigger practical issue is that they work together in a high-pressure place, so any next move needs to be calm, careful, and honest. No forced labels, no panicked decisions, just truth. Would you say something and risk changing everything, or stay quiet until the silence breaks itself? Let me know below. Story 4. I reported him to Human Resources twice, and somehow I became the problem. When I took this warehouse job, I wanted exactly 2 things: a paycheck and peace. I was not trying to build some dramatic workplace family. I was not trying to flirt, entertain people, or become part of anybody's little social circus. I wanted to clock in, do the work, and go home. Then Shane attached himself to me. He is 56, loud, restless, always performing, the class clown type, the kind of person people excuse because he is exhausting in a familiar way instead of a surprising one. He already had this long-running prank dynamic with another coworker named Jane, his so-called work wife, and apparently everybody around them had decided that if they laughed hard enough, none of it counted as inappropriate. At first I told myself he was just awkward, then it escalated. He would bark at me like a little dog when he walked by my aisle. If I ignored him, he would keep doing it until I reacted. He would mumble near me just to make me take out an earbud and ask what he said, only to grin and tell me he was messing with me. He shook the lunch table while I was sitting there. He made faces from the forklift. He kept pushing for a response every time I tried to pull back. And on top of all that, he started fixating on my looks. The hair comments were what really turned my stomach. He kept telling me my hair was beautiful, long, perfect, and that I should never cut it. Once he called me pretty and immediately followed it with some line about how he had been married for decades and would never ruin that, as if saying he would never act on anything somehow made the repeated comments less invasive, as if I was supposed to feel flattered instead of trapped. I even told him I have a sensory disorder and the barking made me feel physically sick. He still kept doing it. That should have been the end of any debate right there. If somebody tells you a behavior is making them ill and you continue, then this is not friendliness. This is entitlement with a smile on. So I started ignoring him harder, and that seemed to make him worse. One day he drove past on the forklift making faces. I refused to react, and he actually got off the machine, came up to me, and basically demanded to know why I was not responding to his attempts to be friendly. I remember feeling this weird hot wave of disbelief. Imagine harassing someone so consistently that you feel owed their participation. That was when I went to Human Resources the first time. I was careful. I did not storm in demanding anyone be fired. I said I wanted the behavior documented and I wanted space. They talked to him. For a few days I thought maybe that would handle it. Then he started again. More comments, more hovering, more of that creepy insistence that I should take his attention as a compliment. So I went back to Human Resources a second time. Only then did he finally stop talking to me, but the silence did not bring peace. It brought retaliation wrapped in social punishment. Jane got colder. Another coworker started telling me I had misread everything and people were now afraid to have fun at work. Somebody pushed my cart. Somebody else made loud, pointed comments whenever I was nearby. Suddenly, I was not just dealing with one boundary violator, I was dealing with the whole culture around him trying to shame me back into compliance. That is the part people do not talk about enough. Sometimes the harassment is one person. Sometimes the bigger wound is what happens when the room decides his comfort matters more than your safety. I did not overreact. I asked for the most basic thing in the world, to come to work without being barked at, stared at, cornered, or turned into somebody's daily entertainment. The fact that this became controversial says more about that workplace than it says about me. End story. Here is what I think. He knew exactly what he was doing. She told him to stop in multiple ways, including directly naming the sensory issue, and he kept going. That is the whole case. What makes this uglier is the retaliation after the report. Once co-workers start punishing somebody for speaking up, the problem is not one obnoxious man anymore. It is a workplace that has normalized boundary violations as entertainment. Would you go back to Human Resources again or start looking for a way out immediately? Let me know below. Story 5. I stopped cooking and my whole house lost its mind. I am 42 years old, and one day I looked around my own kitchen and realized I had somehow raised a house full of adults who could argue for hours about dishes but still expected dinner to appear like magic. I have 5 children, most of them are adults and still living at home. One son pays rent and also uses a large shop space on the property for his side business working on cars, so I have not expected him to do dishes. One daughter moved back in with my grandson, has no job right now, and contributes food benefits and groceries to the house, though not all of them are shared because some are kept for her and her little boy. Another daughter lives in a camper on our property that my husband and I financed, and she pays the camper payment and insurance, but not really the utilities she uses. Everybody had some explanation. Everybody had some reason why their contribution should count in a different category. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I was the one still cooking. I was the one making sure the miners ate. I was the one trying to keep the house moving. I was the one standing over the stove for an hour and then somehow still being expected to clean up everything after grown people who had no issue eating the food. It sounds small until you live inside it every day. The argument that finally broke me was about the dish rotation chart. One person contributes money, so maybe no dishes. Another contributes groceries, so maybe no dishes. Another pays on the camper, so maybe that should cancel dishes too. It became this ridiculous negotiation where everybody wanted to define adulthood in the exact way that cost them the least, and I just snapped. I said if nobody wants to do dishes and everybody wants to fight about fairness, then fine, I am done cooking. I am not standing in that kitchen making full meals for a group of adults who seem personally offended by the idea that food and cleanup belong to the same universe. The truth is, the dishes are not even the whole story. The dishes are just where all the deeper history spilled out. I grew up with a terrible mother, and I swore I would do better. Then I overcorrected. Their father became abusive and eventually spiraled into addiction. After the divorce, I was trying to be both parents at once, and some of the kids got bounced around by survival, breakups, homelessness, and the mess he left behind. This did not happen because I am lazy or because they are monsters. It happened because pain can turn a family into a series of emergency arrangements that never quite get repaired. But understanding how we got here does not mean I have to keep living like this. One daughter has been allowed to bargain with groceries instead of responsibility. Another thinks living outside the main house means the meals somehow do not count. My adult son is helpful in many ways, but somehow the dishes became negotiable there too. My youngest daughter still does chores but drags them out for days. And me? I became the person holding it all together badly enough that nobody respected the strain until I threatened to remove my labor from the system entirely. There is something almost humiliating about realizing you helped create the conditions you are now drowning in, but there is also something freeing about finally saying it out loud. I let too much slide. I told myself everybody had been through enough. I told myself helping more was loving more. I told myself if I just stayed patient a little longer, everybody would naturally step up. They did not. So now I am on strike. I am feeding the people who actually still need parenting. I am stepping back from the people who are fully capable of making a sandwich, rinsing a plate, and participating in the home they live in. Love does not mean becoming the unpaid infrastructure for everybody else's excuses. And if that sentence stings, maybe it is supposed to. End story. Here is what I think. I do feel for her, but I also think the comments she is hearing in her own head are right about one thing. This did not become chaos overnight. She has been carrying too much and negotiating against herself for too long. Still, deciding to stop cooking is not cruelty. It is the first real boundary in a house that has learned to treat her effort like background noise. Sometimes the kindest thing a parent can do for grown children is let inconvenience finally teach what guilt never did. Would you keep the strike going until the whole house resets, or bring dinner back once the first sincere effort shows up? Let me know below. Let me know below. Story 6. At 2:30 in the morning, I found my father's secret life. I was not looking for closure. I was not even looking for him. It was 2:30 in the morning, the kind of hour where your thoughts get loose and your phone starts leading you into strange corners of your own history. I was going through my blocked list on social media, mostly out of boredom, and somehow I ended up clicking through accounts I had forgotten existed. That is when I found my father's page. For context, my father and I never had a good relationship. I am 29 now, the oldest child, and for years I still tried to be a daddy's girl, even when every part of that effort hurt. He was harder on me than everyone else. He was in and out of prison my whole life, and the ugliest thing to admit is that some of the most peaceful stretches of my childhood were the stretches when he was locked away, because when he came home, the house turned into fear again. People who knew him called him the devil. That sounds dramatic until you grow up around somebody who makes every room tense. He was the kind of man who could humiliate you privately and then act supportive in public just to maintain the image of being a father. Whisper, I spent years terrified of him. So when I found that page, I did not just feel surprise. I felt my whole memory of him split open. On the account, he appeared to be presenting as a woman. There was a signal in the username that made the meaning hard to miss. This man, this person who terrorized me, who told me I would never be anything, who made childhood feel like walking through a field full of traps, had been living some other truth somewhere else entirely. And all at once I had two completely different impulses. Part of me wanted revenge. I wanted to expose him. I wanted to hurt him with the same precision he used on me for years. I wanted the whole world to know something he had clearly not told me, because some ugly part of me thought maybe public vulnerability was the one language he would finally understand. But the other part of me felt something I was not prepared for: compassion. Not because what he did to me was suddenly smaller, not because abuse vanishes when you discover an abuser has been carrying their own hidden struggle. None of that is true. But I could still feel the weight of what it must cost a person to hide so much of themselves for so long. I could imagine the fear, the loneliness, the years of pretending, and I hated that my heart was capable of making room for that image at the exact same time it was still carrying the child version of me who just wanted to be safe. That contradiction is what has me stuck. If I speak, am I supporting someone who never protected me? If I stay silent, am I protecting someone who never showed me mercy? If I expose the account, is that justice or just revenge dressed up in moral language? The hardest part is that finding the page did not heal anything. It did not explain away the violence. It did not turn my father into a mysterious, tragic figure I suddenly understand. It just added another layer to somebody I already did not know how to process. I think that is what people miss about discoveries like this. Sometimes a revelation does not answer anything. It just forces two truths to stand in the same room at once. My father may have been carrying a hidden identity. My father also abused me. Both things can be true. Both things are true. And my responsibility is not to resolve his story for him at the cost of reopening mine. So now I am sitting with it. Not because silence feels noble, but because I know enough to know that acting from the sharpest part of pain rarely brings peace. End story. Here is what I think. This is one of those stories where compassion and distance need to coexist. Discovering a hidden identity does not erase abuse, and it also does not require her to become the person who offers comfort to the one who hurt her. Revenge might feel electric for one night and hollow the morning after. She is allowed to choose herself, stay quiet, and let that be enough. Would you keep that discovery private forever or confront him once just to reclaim your own voice? Let me know below. Let me know. 6 stories later, I think the common thread tonight is that truth never arrives gently. If these stories kept you company today, leave a like for me. It really does help more than people think. And if you want another daily trip through heartbreak, chaos, secrets, and the occasional impossible choice, stay close and join us here at Relationship Stories. I will be back tomorrow with more. Until then, be good to yourself, trust your gut, and I will talk to you soon.